The sun rises over the Nile, casting golden light across mud brick homes where civilization has thrived for 3,000 years. In these moments before dawn, ancient Egypt awakens, not as pharaohs and pyramids alone, but as farmers, bakers, scribes, and children, living lives both extraordinary and deeply human. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile around 1400 BCE during the height of the New Kingdom. The river is not merely water, it is the lifeblood of an entire civilization, the reason Egypt exists at all in the midst of endless desert. Along its banks, villages stretch like beads on a string, each one a microcosm of Egyptian society. The air smells of baking bread and river mud, of incense from nearby temples, and the sweat of laborers already beginning their day's work. This is not the Egypt of Hollywood epics or museum displays. This is the Egypt of ordinary people, whose daily rhythms created one of history's most enduring cultures. In a modest home near Thebes, a family begins to stir. The house is made of sun-dried mud bricks, its thick walls designed to keep the interior cool during the scorching midday heat. Small windows sit high on the walls, allowing light while maintaining privacy and temperature control. The floor is packed earth, swept clean each morning. A man named Nacht, a scribe working in the temple granaries, rises from his wooden headrest, a curved support that keeps his elaborately styled wig from being crushed during sleep. His wife, Mutemwia, is already awake, grinding grain between two stones to make flour for the day's bread. Their children sleep on woven reed mats nearby, their small bodies curled together for warmth. Even in this warm climate, where the desert night can bring surprising chill, the rhythm of Egyptian life follows the Nile's calendar more faithfully than any clock. There are 3 seasons: Akhet, the inundation, when the river floods and covers the farmland with fertile black silt; Pareh, the growing season when crops push up from that enriched soil; and Shimu, the harvest, when communities work frantically to bring in grain before the next flood cycle begins. Today is during Pareh, and beyond the village walls, farmers are already in their fields, inspecting the barley and emmer wheat that will feed their families and fill Pharaoh's storehouses. Miremwea's morning work is endless but familiar. She combines the fresh ground flour with water and a bit of saved dough from yesterday's natural yeast captured in the mixture to make bread. Every Egyptian household revolves around bread and beer, the 2 staples that appear at every meal. The bread dough is shaped into rounds and set on a flat stone in the courtyard, where a fire of dried reeds and animal dung burns hot and steady. The smoke rises into the pale morning sky, joining dozens of other cooking fires, creating a haze over the village. This bread will be dense and coarse, filled with tiny grains of sand that inevitably mix into the flour during grinding, a fact that wears down the teeth of every Egyptian, noble and peasant alike, creating dental problems that archaeologists still find in mummies thousands of years later. While the bread bakes, the children wake. The youngest, a girl of 5, wears only a simple linen shift. Her brother, 7 years old, is completely naked, a common state for children in this climate. Both have their heads shaved except for a single side lock of youth, a distinctive hairstyle worn by all Egyptian children, regardless of social class. They will keep these side locks until puberty, when they will be shaved off in a ceremony marking their entry into adulthood. The girl's eyes are outlined with kohl, a dark makeup made from ground galena that serves both aesthetic and practical purposes. The dark lines around her eyes reduce the sun's glare and help prevent eye infections in this dusty, bright environment. Nacht prepares for his day at the temple. He bathes not in a river or pool, but by standing while a servant pours water over him from a jar, the precious liquid collected in a basin below to water the small garden where the family grows onions, lettuce, and garlic. He dresses in a simple white linen kilt, the fabric so finely woven it is almost translucent. Linen is Egypt's gift to itself, made from flax grown in abundance along the Nile's banks. The wealthy wear multiple layers of pleated linen. The poor might have only a single rough garment. Nacht, as a skilled scribe, occupies a middle ground, respected for his literacy, envied for his position, but far from wealthy. He oils his wig made from human hair and heavily styled, and places it on his head. In this heat, many Egyptians shave their natural hair and wear wigs instead, removing them indoors for comfort. The village comes alive as Nacht walks toward the temple complex. Vendors set up small stalls selling dried fish, dates, figs, and cucumbers. Egypt has no coined money, yet that invention is still centuries away, so all commerce happens through barter. A woman trades a basket of onions for a clay pot. A carpenter accepts payment for a stool in the form of grain and a jar of honey. Values are calculated in units called deben, a standard weight of copper, but actual copper rarely changes hands. Instead, goods are exchanged until both parties agree the trade is roughly equal in deben value. The system requires trust, memory, and constant negotiation. Arguments break out regularly, loud and theatrical, but are generally resolved without violence. At the temple, Nacht enters a world of order and hierarchy. The massive stone walls are covered in painted reliefs showing gods receiving offerings, pharaohs smiting enemies, and endless rows of hieroglyphic text. He settles in the scribal office, a columned hall where dozens of men sit cross-legged on the floor, writing on sheets of papyrus or ostraka pieces of broken pottery used for everyday notes and practice. His kit includes reed pens, a palette with cakes of red and black ink, and a water pot. The work is meticulous, recording deliveries of grain to the temple storehouses, calculating rations for temple workers, copying religious texts for the priests. Literacy is rare perhaps. Only 3 to 5% of Egyptians can read and write, making scribes invaluable and relatively powerful. The hieroglyphic script Nacht uses is not merely decorative. It is a complex system combining logographic symbols representing whole words, phonetic signs representing sounds, and determinatives that clarify meaning. Learning it requires years of study, usually beginning in childhood. Boys, and very rarely, girls who show promise, might be sent to temple or palace schools, where they sit for hours, copying classic texts onto broken pieces of pottery, their teachers quick to use the stick for errors or laziness. The most frequently copied text is the Satire of the Trades, which praises the scribal profession by mocking all others. The farmer breaks his back, the potter is covered in mud, the fisherman risks crocodiles, but the scribe sits in the shade and commands respect. Meanwhile, beyond the temple walls, Egypt's agricultural heart beats steadily. In the fields, farmers guide wooden plows pulled by cattle, the simple tools barely scratching the surface of the fertile soil. The black earth the Nile deposits each year is so rich that Egyptian farmers can achieve yields that astound other ancient peoples. After the plow comes the seed scattered by hand, and then, in a scene that appears frequently in tomb paintings, sheep or goats are driven across the field to trample the seeds into the soil. Irrigation is constant work. Networks of canals and basins must be maintained, and shaduf devices counterweighted poles with buckets lift water from canals to higher fields. The operators working in rhythmic motion, hour after hour under the relentless sun. Back in the village, Bitemwia tends to her own work. She has bread to bake for the next several days, beer to brew a thick, nutritious beverage made from partially baked bread, soaked in water, and allowed to ferment, and clothes to wash in the canal. Laundry is beaten against stones, a task that wears out fabric quickly, making linen clothing a significant expense that must be carefully maintained. She also spins thread, a never-ending task for Egyptian women. Every household needs constant supplies of linen thread to weave into cloth, and spinning is considered so fundamental to female identity that spindles and distaffs appear frequently in women's tombs. Afternoon brings different rhythms. The sun reaches its brutal zenith, and those who can retreat indoors or to shaded courtyards. This is when children might receive lessons if their families can afford education, when women gather to gossip and work together, when craftsmen in their workshops pause for the midday meal. In workshops across Egypt, specialists practice trades passed down through generations. Potters spin clay vessels on simple wheels, their hands shaping jars for grain, water, and wine with practiced efficiency. Carpenters work precious imported wood. Egypt has few trees suitable for furniture creating beds, chairs, and boxes inlaid with ivory and ebony. Jewelers craft elaborate pieces from gold, turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, creating the ornate collars and bracelets that Egyptians of all classes wear when they can afford them. The market buzzes again as the heat relents. Fish vendors display their catch from the Nile perch, catfish, and tilapia laid out on palm fronds. The Nile is generous with fish, making it a protein source even the poor can access regularly. Butchers sell meat beef for the wealthy, goat or duck for others, though most Egyptians eat meat only on special occasions or festival days. The diet of ordinary Egyptians centers on bread, beer, onions, and whatever vegetables and legumes they can grow or barter for. It is monotonous by modern standards, but generally adequate, providing enough nutrition to fuel a population that builds monuments and maintains an empire. As evening approaches, Nakht returns home. His day has been long but not unusual, recording, calculating, occasionally reading letters for illiterate villagers, settling disputes over grain measurements. His compensation comes partly in rations, grain, oil, and vegetables distributed by the temple, a system that binds workers to institutions and ensures loyalty. The family eats together, sitting on the floor around a low table or on stools if they can afford them. The meal is simple: bread, onions, a fish that Mutemwia grilled over the fire, some dates for sweetness. They drink beer from clay cups. The children chatter about their day games played with other village children. A snake spotted near the canal, a story overheard about crocodile gods in the river. After dinner, as twilight settles over the Nile Valley, the village takes on a different character. Oil lamps, simple clay vessels filled with oil, with a wick of twisted linen flicker to life in homes and streets. The temple across the way glows with torchlight as priests perform evening rituals, offering food to the gods, burning incense, singing hymns that drift across the evening air. Egyptians believe deeply that the gods are real and present, that they inhabit their statues in the temple's inner sanctums, that they require food and clothing and care just as humans do. This is not abstract theology, but practical religion. The gods keep the sun rising, the Nile flooding, the crops growing. Neglect them, and catastrophe follows. The children are told stories before sleep, tales of gods and heroes, of Osiris who died and was resurrected, of Isis who tricked Ra into revealing his true name, of Horus who battled Seth for the throne of Egypt. These stories are more than entertainment. They encode the values and beliefs that hold Egyptian society together. Justice, order, truth concepts embodied in the goddess Mat are paramount. The universe runs on balance, and every person has a role in maintaining it. Kings perform rituals to ensure cosmic order. Scribes maintain accurate records to prevent chaos. Farmers work the land to feed the nation. Even children learn that their actions matter, that lies and disorder offend both gods and humans. As the family settles for sleep, the village grows quiet except for the distant sounds of dogs barking, the calls of night birds along the river, the occasional voice of a watchman making his rounds. The stars emerge in patterns Egyptians have mapped and named, celestial markers used to track seasons and guide religious calendars. The Milky Way is seen as a reflection of the Nile, a cosmic river that the sun god Re travels each night in his boat, battling the serpent of chaos before emerging triumphant each dawn. The Egyptians live in a universe that makes sense to them, where heaven mirrors earth, where every element of life has meaning and connection. This single day in Nakht's family, multiplied across thousands of villages, across centuries of stability, represents something remarkable in human history. The ancient Egyptians created a civilization that lasted longer than any other, maintaining its core culture, language, and beliefs for 3,000 years. They did this not through constant conquest or dramatic innovation, but through the steady rhythms of daily life, through the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned to live in harmony with the Nile's cycles, through the binding force of shared beliefs and practices that gave every person, from pharaoh to farmer, a place in the cosmic order. The remarkable continuity of Egyptian civilization came from these daily patterns repeated across generations, the same recipes, the same tools, the same gods, the same stories told to children in the twilight. Change happened, of course, but slowly, absorbing foreign influences while maintaining essential Egyptian identity. The pyramids and temples that astound us were built not by slaves, driven by whips as old myths claimed, but by organized communities of workers who took pride in their labor, who were fed and housed and respected for their skills, who saw themselves as participants in projects that pleased the gods and honored their nation. Yet even 3,000 years must end. The world changes, empires rise and fall, and eventually foreign powers, Persians, Greeks, Romans conquered Egypt, gradually eroding the old ways. The ancient language faded, replaced by Greek and later Arabic. The old gods were abandoned when Christianity and then Islam arrived. The hieroglyphs became mysterious symbols that no one could read for over 1,000 years, until the Rosetta Stone finally unlocked their secrets in the 19th century. The daily rhythms that Nakht and Mutemwia knew vanished into history, preserved only in tomb paintings, papyrus fragments, and the excavated remains of villages buried under desert sand. But here, through scholarship and imagination, through the painstaking work of archaeologists and historians who piece together fragments into stories, we can visualize how they lived not as distant alien figures, but as humans fundamentally like ourselves, loving their children, complaining about their work, finding joy in small pleasures, believing in forces greater than themselves, seeking meaning in the cycles of their days. The baker's hands shaping dough, the scribe's pen moving across papyrus, the farmer reading the Nile's moods, the mother singing her child to sleep. These are not exotic customs from a vanished world, but human experiences that connect us across 5,000 years to people who, like us, woke each day, wondering what it would bring, hoping for, enough grateful for small mercies, dreaming of something beyond the ordinary. In the end, ancient Egypt as daily life reveals a profound truth. Civilizations are built not in palaces and temples alone, but in 10,000 ordinary homes where people perform the unremarkable work of living, feeding families, teaching children, creating beauty within their means, maintaining the fragile order that separates human society from chaos, and finding, within those constraints, moments of genuine happiness and meaning that echo across millennia to remind us that our own daily struggles and small joys are part of an ancient, unbroken human story.